Chapter 3. Creature of Shadow. Eli and Lisa sat across from Tata Noel, their eyes fixed on the old man. The room felt heavy with the weight of what he had just told them. Eli's thoughts were racing, trying to make sense of it all. The creature that had attacked him wasn't just some wild animal. It was something far worse. And the mention of poison in his wound made his skin crawl. "Tata, what was that thing?" Eli asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tata Noel took a deep breath, his eyes clouded with memories. "It was an Aswang," he said, his voice steady but filled with a deep-seated wariness. "A creature of the dark. There are many kinds, many tribes. Some feed on blood, some on flesh, some can change their form to deceive. But the one you faced, it's one of the worst." Eli and Lisa exchanged a glance, both leaning in closer as Tata Noel continued. 40 years ago, he began, his voice taking on a distant tone. "I faced that same creature, a gabunin, a lycanthrope. They transform into something like a wolf, but far more dangerous. They hunt alone, using stealth and strength to overpower their prey." Tata Noel paused, lifting his shirt to reveal a deep, puckered scar on his right side. It was a nasty, jagged mark that looked like it had been there for a long time. Eli and Lisa stared at it, both horrified and fascinated. "This," Tata Noel said, his voice tinged with a mix of pride and sorrow, "is what happens when you're not careful." Eli felt a shiver run down his spine as he imagined the pain Tata Noel must have endured. "What happened?" he asked, his eyes wide. "I was younger then, full of energy and maybe a little too confident." Tata Noel began, a small, rueful smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I thought I could handle anything that came my way. But the gabunin, it was something else. I was hunting in the forest, much like you were today. I didn't realize I was being hunted myself." He paused, the memory clearly painful. "It attacked me out of nowhere. One moment, the forest was quiet, and the next, I was on the ground, bleeding. Its claws, they're not just sharp. They carry poison. The gabunin's saliva is venomous, and they coat their claws with it before they strike. When the claws wounded me, I felt the poison seeping into my blood. The pain was indescribable." Eli and Lisa listened, their faces pale. They had known Tata Noel was strong, but hearing this made them realize just how much he had been through. "How did you survive?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling slightly. Tata Noel's smile faded, replaced by a grim look. "It wasn't easy. I was lucky to have been with others who knew what to do. They pulled me out of there and treated the wound quickly. Even then, it took weeks for the poison to work its way out of my system. And the scar, well, it's a reminder that even the strongest can be brought low by these creatures." Eli's hand subconsciously went to his own shoulder, where the gabunin had clawed him earlier. The wound still throbbed, and the thought of poison lurking in his veins made him uneasy. "Tata, do you think? Could it still be out there? The same one that attacked you?" Tata Noel nodded slowly, his expression serious. "I believe so. These creatures, they don't die easily, and they don't forget. If it's the same gabunin, it may have been watching, waiting for the right time to strike again. And this time, it found you." Eli swallowed hard, the reality of the situation sinking in. He had barely escaped with his life, and now he knew just how dangerous his attacker had been. "What do we do now?" he asked, trying to keep the fear out of his voice. Tata Noel leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing in thought. "We prepare," he said firmly. "We need to be ready if it comes back. And Eli, you need to be careful. The gabunin will see you as a threat now, especially if it thinks you're connected to me. You've got to be on your guard at all times." Lisa reached out and placed a comforting hand on Eli's arm. "We'll get through this, Eli," she said softly. "You're not alone." Eli nodded, grateful for her support but still feeling the weight of Tata Noel's words. The gabunin was out there, somewhere in the shadows, and it was dangerous. But more than that, It was personal. It had attacked him, and it had a history with Tata Noel. Eli realized that this fight wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about facing something much deeper, something that had haunted Tata Noel for decades. Tata Noel's voice broke through Eli's thoughts. "I'll teach you what I know," he said, determination etched on his face. "You need to be ready, Eli. The Gabunin won't stop until it gets what it wants. But neither will we." Eli nodded again, this time with more resolve. He wasn't going to let fear control him. He had faced the Gabunin once, and he would be ready if it came after him again. With Tata Noel's guidance and Lisa's support, he knew he had a chance. The scar on Tata Noel's side was a reminder of the danger, but it was also a testament to survival. Eli made up his mind then and there. He would survive, no matter what. As the night wore on, Tata Noel continued to share his knowledge with Eli and Lisa, teaching them about the different types of Aswang and how to defend against them. Eli listened intently, absorbing every word. He knew that this knowledge was his best weitaten against the darkness that lurked in the forest. And as the moon rose high in the sky, casting long shadows across the room, Eli felt a strange mix of fear and determination. The road ahead would be dangerous, but he wasn't the same boy who had entered the forest that morning. He had seen the darkness, and now he was ready to fight it. Eli's heart pounded in his chest, the weight of Tata Noel's story settling heavily on him. The old man's tale of the Gabunin, a dark creature from the tribe of lycanthropes, had shaken him. The venomous beast had once nearly killed Tata Noel, and now it had set its sights on him. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. "Tata," Eli began, his voice shaking, "what can we do to protect ourselves from this thing? I don't want it to come back and hurt us." Tata Noel, sensing the urgency in Eli's voice, straightened up. His eyes, usually kind and patient, now gleamed with a sharp focus. "There are steps we can take, Eli," he said calmly, "but we must act quickly and carefully." Eli nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He watched as Tata Noel moved with purpose, the old man's years of experience evident in every motion. First, Tata Noel instructed, "You need to cleanse yourself, Eli. The Gabunin's venom can linger on the skin, even after the wounds have been treated. We must ensure it doesn't seep any deeper." Eli followed Tata Noel into the small kitchen area, where the old man began gathering supplies. He reached for a large clay pot and filled it with water from the well just outside. "Lisa," Tata Noel called out, "fetch me some salt, vinegar, and calamansi." Lisa, who had been quietly absorbing everything, quickly sprang into action. She grabbed a handful of salt from a wooden container, a small bottle of vinegar, and a few fresh calamansi fruits. She handed them to Tata Noel, her hands trembling slightly. Tata Noel mixed the ingredients into the pot of water, squeezing the calamansi to release the juice, which mixed with the sharp scent of vinegar. He stirred the mixture with a wooden ladle, his movements steady and precise. "Take this, Eli," Tata Noel said, handing him the pot. "Bathe in this water. It will neutralize any traces of the Gabunin's venom and disinfect your wound. Make sure to wash thoroughly, especially around the scratches." Eli took the pot with a nod, grateful for Tata Noel's guidance. He disappeared into the small washroom, carefully following the old man's instructions. The water was cool against his skin, the scent of calamansi and vinegar filling the air. As he scrubbed the mixture over his body, Eli felt a slight sting where the venom had entered, but he gritted his teeth and endured it. It was a small price to pay for safety. When he emerged from the washroom, Eli felt cleaner, both physically and mentally. The mixture had worked its way into his wounds, leaving him feeling more secure. Tata Noel nodded approvingly when he saw Eli. "Good, that's one step done," he said. "Now, we need to protect the house." Eli and Lisa followed Tata Noel as he headed back into the main room. The old man moved quickly, his mind clearly racing through the preparations they needed to make. "Lisa," Tata Noel began, "we need salt and ash from the stove. Go and get as much as you can." We're going to create a mystical barrier around the house. Lisa nodded and hurried to the kitchen, her heart pounding in her chest. She scooped up the ash from the bottom of the stove, making sure to mix it with a generous amount of salt. When she returned, Tata Noel took the bowl from her, his hands steady as he began to prepare the mixture. This, Tata Noel explained, holding up a handful of the salt and ash mixture, will serve as an invisible barrier. When spread outside the house and onto the roof, it will act like a minefield. The Gabunin will be repelled by it. Eli watched as Tata Noel began to spread the mixture across the threshold of the house. He sprinkled it carefully, creating a line of defense that would keep the dark creature at bay. The old man moved methodically, making sure to cover every inch of the perimeter. Eli, Tata Noel said, once we've secured the house, we need to protect the windows and doors. Garlic can serve as a barrier, and inverted stick brooms propped against the doors will confuse the Gabunin. Eli nodded and quickly set to work. He fetched the garlic from the kitchen, breaking the bulbs into individual cloves. He placed the garlic along the windowsills, their pungent smell filling the air. The brooms were easy to find, leaning against the back wall, and Eli placed them at the doors, making sure they were inverted as Tata Noel had instructed. Lisa followed closely behind, making sure every detail was attended to. She was meticulous, knowing that every small action could mean the difference between safety and danger. As they worked, Eli couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The preparations, though necessary, were a stark reminder of the threat that loomed over them. The Gabunin was out there, somewhere in the darkness, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Once the house was secure, Tata Noel took a deep breath and turned to Eli and Lisa. "We've done what we can for now," he said, his voice steady, "but we must remain vigilant." Eli nodded, his resolve hardening. He knew that this was just the beginning, and that they would need to be prepared for whatever came next. As if reading his thoughts, Tata Noel walked over to a large wooden chest that had been tucked away in a corner. He opened it carefully, revealing its contents: a long whip made from the tail of a stingray, and a dagger forged from the tip of the same tail. "These," Tata Noel said, holding up the whip and dagger, "are our last line of defense. The stingray's tail is poisonous to creatures like the Gabunin. They fear it, and it can wound them deeply." Eli eyed the Weetatans with a mix of awe and fear. He had seen Tata Noel use the whip before, practicing in the early mornings when he thought no one was watching. The old man was skilled, his movements precise and deadly. "Eli," Tata Noel said, his voice firm, "if it comes to it, you may need to use these. But remember, these Weetatans are only as strong as the one who wields them. You must be calm, focused, and fearless." Eli swallowed hard, feeling the weight of Tata Noel's words. He nodded, knowing that he would do whatever it took to protect his family. Lisa stepped forward, her eyes full of determination. "We'll do this together," she said, her voice steady. "We won't let that creature take anything from us." Tata Noel smiled, a small but genuine expression of pride. "That's the spirit," he said. "We're stronger when we stand together." With the house secured and their plan in place, the three of them stood in silence for a moment, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. The night was still and quiet, but they knew that danger lurked just beyond the safety of their home. "Stay alert," Tata Noel warned, his voice a low rumble. "The Gabunin won't give up easily, but neither will we." Eli, Lisa, and Tata Noel shared a determined glance, their bond stronger than ever. They knew that the fight was far from over, but they were ready to face whatever came their way. Together, they would stand against the darkness. The night was thick and heavy, every sound amplified in the silence. Eli, Tata Noel, and Lisa huddled around the kitchen table, the dim light from the lone oil lamp casting long shadows on the walls. The atmosphere was tense, as if the very air was bracing itself for something dreadful. The old house creaked occasionally, but beyond that, everything was eerily quiet. The golden Maya perched on Lisa's head seemed unusually calm. Its tiny body was motionless, except for the faint pulsing glow that emanated from its feathers. Eli and Tata Noel couldn't help but stare at the little bird, captivated by its strange and serene presence. There was something otherworldly about it, something that felt both protective and foreboding. Tata Noel leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Eli, where did you find this bird?" Eli hesitated for a moment, his mind replaying the events of the day. "In the forest," he began softly, careful not to wake Lisa, who had started to nod off in her chair. "I smelled something sweet, like flowers, but different. I followed the scent, and that's when I saw it. The bird. It was just there, like it appeared out of nowhere." Tata Noel's eyes narrowed, his mind turning over this new information. "And it wasn't afraid of you?" Eli shook his head. "No, it wasn't. I think it wanted me to find it. But then, the attack happened." Tata Noel nodded, his expression unreadable. He didn't say anything more, instead lapsing into a deep silence. His eyes, however, betrayed the wheels of thought turning in his mind. The old man was clearly troubled by what Eli had told him, but he kept his thoughts to himself, perhaps to avoid alarming the others. Time seemed to drag on as the three sat there, trying to stave off the sleep that tugged at their eyelids. Lisa had finally succumbed to exhaustion, her head lolling back against the chair, her mouth slightly open as she breathed softly. Tata Noel's eyes were closed, but his grip on the whip in his lap suggested he was far from asleep. Eli, though trying his best to stay awake, found his eyes growing heavy, his mind drifting in and out of consciousness. Just as he was about to nod off, a sound outside snapped him back to attention, a soft, low growling that seemed to echo around the house. Eli's heart jumped in his chest, and he quickly nudged Tata Noel, who was instantly alert, his eyes snapping open as he gripped the whip tightly. They listened intently, the growling growing louder, more menacing. Eli's pulse quickened, his breath shallow as he strained to hear. The growls were accompanied by the unmistakable sound of something heavy padding around the house, each step crushing the sand beneath it. The air inside the house grew thick and stifling, the temperature rising unnaturally. Then, a stench hit them, a sickening odor of rotting meat that made Eli gag and Lisa stir in her sleep. Lisa's snore turned into a choked gasp as the foul smell filled her nostrils. Before she could fully wake up, Eli clamped a hand over her mouth, his eyes wide with fear. "Shh!" he whispered urgently, his other hand gripping her arm to keep her from moving. The last thing they needed was to make any noise. Tata Noel's face was grim, his eyes fixed on the door. The growling was now accompanied by a deep, rasping voice, so unnaturally low that it seemed to resonate in their bones. The voice was everywhere and nowhere at once, as if it was right next to them and yet far off in the distance. "You have something that is mine," the voice growled, each word dripping with malice. Eli felt a chill run down his spine. The voice was terrifying, unnatural in every way. It was as if the darkness itself had spoken, threatening to swallow them whole. The growling continued, circling the house, each step of the creature reverberating through the walls. Tata Noel stood up slowly, his face pale but resolute. He motioned for Eli to stay still as he moved to the window, careful not to make a sound. He peered through the small gap between the wooden shutters, his heart pounding in his chest. The creature was outside, just beyond the barrier of salt and ash they had laid down earlier. Its massive shadow moved across the ground, its form barely visible in the faint moonlight. Red eyes glowed menacingly from the darkness, fixing on the house with a predatory gaze. The creature was huge, its shape hunched and bestial, a grotesque blend of man and beast. Its claws scraped against the earth, leaving deep gouges in the sand as it circled, searching for a way in. Tata Noel swallowed hard, his mouth dry. He knew what this was. The Gabunin, the very same creature he had faced all those years ago. It had found them. Eli and Lisa sat frozen, their eyes wide with fear as the creature continued its relentless pacing. The stench of decay grew stronger, seeping through the cracks in the walls, making Eli's stomach turn. He tightened his grip on Lisa, who was trembling, her eyes squeezed shut in terror. The voice came again, louder this time, the growl underlying it more pronounced. "Give it to me." Tata Noel stepped back from the window, his mind racing. He had faced this monster before, and he knew what it wanted. But this time, they were trapped. The creature was smarter than before, more cunning, and it wasn't going to leave without a fight. He turned to Eli, his voice low and urgent. "Stay quiet, no matter what. We can't let it in." Eli nodded, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. He could see the tension in Tata Noel's face, the fear he was trying so hard to mask. Lisa's grip on Eli's arm was painfully tight, her body rigid with terror. The creature's growls grew louder, more insistent. It stopped pacing and stood in front of the door, its heavy breathing audible even from where they sat. Eli held his breath, every muscle in his body tensed, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Suddenly, there was a loud thud as the creature slammed its massive body against the door. The whole house shook, dust falling from the ceiling. Lisa let out a muffled scream, which Eli quickly silenced with his hand. Tata Noel stepped forward, his whip ready, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. Not against this. The door creaked under the weight of the creature's assault, but it held, and the salt and ash barrier doing its job. The creature snarled in frustration, raking its claws across the wood, trying to tear its way in. Time seemed to stretch, every second an eternity as they waited, hoping the barrier would hold. The creature continued its attack, its growls turning into roars of anger as it failed to break through. Finally, after what felt like hours, the creature let out one final, blood-curdling scream of rage. The sound was deafening, a horrible mixture of human and beast that echoed through the night. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the attack stopped. Silence fell over the house, the only sound the faint crackling of the oil lamp. Eli dared to breathe again, his chest tight with fear. He glanced at Tata Noel, who was still standing by the door, his whip clutched tightly in his hand. The old man waited a few moments, listening for any sign that the creature was still there. But all was quiet. Slowly, he lowered his whip, his body relaxing slightly. "It's gone," he whispered, though the words brought little comfort. He knew this wasn't the end. The Gabunin would be back. It was only a matter of time. Eli released Lisa, who was shaking like a leaf. She looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, her face pale. What was that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Eli didn't have an answer. He could only shake his head, his mind still reeling from the encounter. But one thing was clear, their lives had just become much more dangerous.
We want to bring our rich and amazing history and beliefs as stories that the whole world can enjoy. We hope you had a great time listening to these creative tales as much as we enjoyed writing and making them. We would love to hear your thoughts about the stories. Let us know in the comments section and share the video to your friends. If you like this kind of videos, please hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to show your support and help us produce more content for you. You can reach us through our Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Say hi. We would love to hear from our friends and grow the community. Thank you, and stay spooky.